People think Stoicism means not feeling anything. That's not wisdom, that's damage. That misunderstanding isn't harmless. It's quietly making people colder, more avoidant, and less human, while they call it strength. The Stoics never asked you to become a stone. They asked you to become clear, and there's a difference. Because when you suppress emotion, it doesn't disappear. It distorts, it leaks into your relationships, your decisions, your sense of self. But when you understand emotion correctly, when you meet it without being ruled by it, you gain something far more powerful than numbness. You gain freedom. So let's correct this carefully, because if you get Stoicism wrong, it won't make you resilient, it will make you disconnected. And that's the opposite of what the Stoics were trying to teach. Here's the modern problem this solves. A lot of thoughtful people are trying to become stronger by shutting down what they feel. They avoid grief. They downplay love. They suppress anger instead of understanding it. On the surface, it looks like control, but underneath, it's tension, exhaustion, distance from others. The misreading is simple. If I feel less, I suffer less. The truth is harder. When you stop feeling, you stop living clearly. Stoicism was never about less feeling, it was about better judgment. Let's go back to the source. Stoicism began in ancient Greece and matured in Rome through thinkers like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius. These weren't detached monks, they were deeply involved in life. Teachers, statesmen, advisors, emperors. They dealt with exile, illness, political pressure, betrayal, and loss. And they wrote constantly about emotions. Not how to eliminate them, but how to understand them. The key distinction they made wasn't between feeling and not feeling. It was between being carried away by emotion and seeing it clearly. The Stoics believed emotions come from judgments. Change the judgment and the emotion changes. But nowhere did they argue that you should become numb. In fact, they repeatedly warn against it because numbness isn't strength, it's avoidance dressed up as discipline. Core teaching, part 1. Men are disturbed not by things but by the views which they take of them. Epictetus Enchiridion. This is one of the most quoted Stoic lines and one of the most misunderstood. People hear it and think, so I shouldn't feel anything. But that's not what it says. It says your emotional reaction comes from how you interpret the event, not the event itself. Meaning matters. Let's say you don't get a response to a message. One interpretation. They don't respect me, mate. Another. They're busy. Same situation, different emotion. The Stoic move isn't to suppress the feeling, it's to question the judgment behind it. In modern life, this shows up everywhere. You assume rejection where there's none. You assume failure where there's uncertainty. You assume threat where there's discomfort. And your emotions follow those assumptions. The practical application is simple, but not easy. When you feel a strong emotion, pause and ask, what story am I telling myself right now? Not to invalidate the feeling, but to understand it. Because once you see the judgment, you have a choice. And that's where freedom begins. Core teaching, part 2. When you kiss your child, say to yourself that you only kiss things which are human, and thus you will not be disturbed if they die. Epictetus Enchiridion 3. At first glance, this sounds cold, even disturbing, but look closer. Epictetus isn't saying don't love your child, he's saying love fully while remembering reality. Everything you love is fragile, not to make you distant, but to make you present. Because when you deny fragility, you cling. When you remember it, you appreciate. Modern misinterpretation turns this into emotional detachment. But the Stoic intention is the opposite. It's deeper connection. Without illusion, you don't love less. You love without pretending it will last forever. In real life, this matters in relationships. If you act like people are permanent, you become careless. If you act like loss is impossible, you become shocked when it happens. But if you hold both love and impermanence together, You become attentive, grateful, less controlling. The practice here is subtle. When something matters to you, don't push the feeling away. Let it exist fully. But quietly remind yourself, this is valuable because it's not guaranteed. That doesn't reduce emotion. It sharpens it. Core teaching. Part 3. Do not say of anything, I have lost it, but I have returned it. Epictetus Enchiridion. 11. This line is often used to promote emotional suppression, as if you're supposed to feel nothing when you lose something. But that's not what Epictetus is doing. He's reframing ownership, not denying grief. The Stoics never denied that loss hurts. Seneca, in his letters, openly grieves. Marcus Aurelius writes about missing people. They felt deeply. What they resisted was the belief that loss is injustice, the idea that the world owed them permanence. In modern terms, you lose a job, a relationship ends, someone important dies. The pain is real. Stoicism doesn't ask you to erase it. It asks you to remove the added layer. This shouldn't have happened, because that layer multiplies suffering. The application is this: when something painful happens, allow the first reaction, but gently challenge the second. The story that says reality is wrong. Instead, shift the frame. This was never mine to keep forever. Not to become indifferent, but to align with reality. And from that alignment, you recover faster. Not because you feel less, but because you resist less. Now let's connect this to modern psychology. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, rests on a similar foundation. Thoughts influence emotions. Not events directly, but the interpretation of them. Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis formalized this in the 20th century. But the Stoics were there 2,000 years earlier. The key overlap is this: you don't control what you feel immediately, but you can examine the thought patterns feeding those feelings. CBT calls them cognitive distortions. The Stoics called them false judgments, catastrophizing, mind reading, all or nothing thinking. These amplify emotional reactions unnecessarily. But here's the critical difference from suppression. CBT doesn't tell you to ignore feelings. It tells you to investigate them. Just like the Stoics. If you suppress anger, it becomes resentment. If you suppress sadness, it becomes numbness. If you suppress fear, it becomes anxiety. But if you examine the thinking behind them, they begin to loosen. Both Stoicism and CBT aim for the same outcome, not emotional emptiness, but emotional clarity. Feeling without distortion, responding without panic. That's not weakness, that's precision. Here's a simple weekly exercise. For the next 7 days, don't try to control your emotions. Track them. Once a day, write down one moment where you felt something strongly. Just one. Then answer 3 questions. What happened? What did I immediately think about it? What did I feel? Now, add one more layer. Is there another way to interpret this? Not a positive spin, just an alternative explanation. That's it. No forcing yourself to feel better. No pretending it didn't matter. Just observation and adjustment. By the end of the week, you'll notice patterns. Certain thoughts that repeat. Certain assumptions that trigger reactions. And slowly, without suppressing anything, you'll start responding differently. Because clarity changes behavior. Before we close, one book recommendation: Seneca's Letters from a Stoic. Not because it's abstract philosophy, but because it's personal, messy, honest, human. Seneca writes about grief, anxiety, anger, friendship. He doesn't pretend to be perfect. He reflects, questions, corrects himself. That's real Stoicism. Not suppression, not detachment, but ongoing alignment with reality. If you take one thing from this episode, let it be this: Stoicism doesn't ask you to feel less. It asks you to see more clearly. And when you do, your emotions stop controlling you. Not because they disappear, but because you finally understand them. If this resonated, take a moment to reflect. Where in your life have you been confusing numbness with strength? That question alone can change a lot.